Test, test. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to NorthStar online and in person. We're so excited to have you with us today as we continue to look at recovery. And recovery is such a interesting subject because there's usually in the background a lot of pain that goes along with recovery. And that's what we try to do at NorthStar is try to help us understand how the pain of our lives have created us to want to be addictive, and then what we can do to try to reduce the addiction that we have. And so it's a hard journey. I always tell people I think recovery is a mixture of grieving our losses, recognizing the pain that caused the pain to be grieving, and then understanding how to quit. And it's hard to do. So I think a lot of times with when we're grieving, it can make it hard because I don't know about anybody that wants to actually grieve. I mean, that's tough to do. And so it's hard for us when we talk about that. And, you know, when we talk about our definition we like to use a lot in here is habitual behavior to avoid pain. And so I always think about like Russell Brand, who you may know as an actor and comedian, talks about how addiction starts with pain and addiction ends with pain. And so that's what we have to keep hearing is that pain is what started most of this, emotional, psychological pain, even sometimes physical. And then the problem is that we don't quit being addicted until we have a lot of pain. And so it's not a journey any of us want to be on is pain plus pain, equals recovery, but that's really what it is. So today we're talking about perfectionism, shame, and guilt. I call these the big three. They just continue to keep on giving and giving. And so we have to look at this to understand how to recover. So and real fast, I want to talk about NorthStar real quick. So we meet on Fridays at 6:30 behind the church if you're local. And on Wednesday nights we meet at 6:30 in front of the church. So if you're here local. And, of course, any of you online are listening to us now. I'm so glad to have you with us. And if you ever do want to contact me, you can call me at 804-746-5081. You can also email me at csimpson@wgva.church. We divide addictions into three kind of categories. We have our substance abuse, which I think most of us always understand that. The second group is compulsive behaviors. That would be buying something from Amazon 3 times a day, even though you don't need it. It could be overeating. It could be gambling, watching pornography, being on social media, and anything that overwhelms us and overpowers us is an addiction and becomes a problem for us, right? So the third one is, of course, people addictions, and that one's just so sometimes hard to describe, but when we assign our happiness to someone or we think that we have to give up ourselves for someone else, that's being addictive. And it never works, by the way. Much as we try, it doesn't work. And to really understand healthy relationships is something that's very difficult for a lot of us in our addictive behaviors because we're addictive now and that our goal is to keep addicted. But also for many of us, don't think we had very many good role models growing up. So and make sure you always hear this from me, that, you know what, if you're listening to me, you're probably an adult now, so it's your job to recover. We can blame families, childhoods all day. The fact is we're now here, and we have to get better. We have to we have to look at ourselves. And so, again, the quote I always use is, when I talk to people, because I am very interested in your childhoods, because I know it affects us today. One guy said that 92% of our adult behavior is based on our childhood. I'm not sure why he said 92 instead of 91 or 85, but the point is the majority of what we do is affected by our childhood. So like I always say, I'm not really interested in your childhood. What I'm interested in is how your childhood is affecting you today. That's what's so important. And that also means that we're not going to sit around and blame and make excuses for that. This is about us getting better, moving forward, breaking cycles, seeing the differences in our own families because of that. It's a wonderful thing. So shame is a huge part of addiction, and it's so hard for us to recover when we carry shame with us. Some of us, one of the things I always like to ask people, I said, what if you were to use a word or two that would describe your childhood, what would it be? And so one of them for me is lazy. I loved to read. I didn't like to farm. I grew up on a farm. I didn't want to farm. It wasn't it just wasn't something I wanted to do. I wanted to play baseball in the summer. I didn't care about irrigating, right? So I read tons of books. I did all these things, and so I got labeled as lazy. I really wasn't lazy, but I got labeled as that. So now I have to deal with being a workaholic all the time because I hear that in my head all the time that I was lazy. I've known people who told me that they were labeled as stupid growing up, or they were unorganized. All these things that were labels that you hung on to, and you still hang on to. It's always important to kind of remember those things. So the problem is when we carry shame with us, then we do things like we isolate, we abuse stuff, we become angry, we become hard-headed, judgmental, all those things. And that's what makes it so hard for us to recover, because you can't really recover by yourself. And so if you don't trust anyone, everybody's harmed you in the past in your mind, of course, always known there is a common denominator there, everyone, right, on that. And so we become very difficult. Let's be honest, for us that are recovering, we weren't easy to get along with there for a while, and we were very self-centered and very destructive, all those things, blaming everybody else, right? But really what it was us trying to hide our shame, try to avoid our shame, all those things. So read Isaiah 1. I'm going to start talking about Isaiah some because I think he's got a lot of recovery type writing in his stuff. So he writes, this is Isaiah 1. Why bother even trying to do anything with you when you just keep to your bullheaded ways? You keep beating your heads against brick walls. Everything within you protests against you. From the bottom of your feet to the top of your head, nothing's working right. If that doesn't describe someone in addiction, I'm not quite sure what else you need to hear, right? I love this. You keep beating your heads against brick walls, and you even know that it's not working yourself, but you continue to do it. But it makes sense when you have shame. When you have shame, the last thing you want to do is think about you, because everything you think about is bad. So all you do is consider how bad off you are, how terrible you are, or how bad people were around you, all these things. So nothing good is going to happen from this. And it's just hard for us to recover. So I'm going to read Psalms 51, and this is David talking. And David has lots of reasons to have shame because he did lots of things he shouldn't have done. But he also did a lot of great things. I mean, he's kind of over the top for all of us of what we are. He just probably did it a little bigger than we did. So, generous in love, God give grace. Huge in mercy, wipe out my bad record. Scrub away my guilt. Soak out my sins in your laundry. I know how bad I've been. My sins are staring me down. You're the one I've violated, and you've seen it all, seen the full extent of my evil. You have all the facts before you. Whatever you decide about me is fair. I've been out of step with you for a long time, in the wrong since before I was born. What you're after is truth from the inside out. Either enter me, then conceive a new, true life. So that's David where he needs to be. So guilt is, I made a mistake, right? I pulled out in front of someone, didn't mean to, right? Or I broke something, whatever it is. I made a mistake. That's one thing. Shame is, I am a mistake. And it is so important for us to, excuse me, got a frog in my throat. Sorry. What we need to do is start to see the difference, because what we do, and the problem is if we're not careful, if we carry too much guilt leads to shame. correct. So we always have to be careful on that one. That's why I love to give people a hard time when I'm talking to them and I hear them say sorry a lot. I always tell them, you need to start keeping track of how many times you say sorry in a day. And it is one of the best things they do because they go, oh my gosh, I said sorry 32 times in 3 hours. And I realized that I didn't need to be saying sorry all that time. But that's an example of how our guilt goes to shame. And the 3 things that we can do to grow our shame is withdraw and isolate, never talk about anything we've done or experienced, and be judgmental. That's how we get to perfection. Because when we're being judgmental on other people, I promise you the first person you're being judgmental with is ourselves. That's a given. And, I see so many people, with what I do with recovery, I see lots of pain from people's past. But it isn't that, I think, that's so bad that harms us. It's the silence with it. Nobody ever talks about it. Because you have a shame-based family, you're not going to talk about anything. But you're going to keep hurting each other. You're going to keep harming each other. And you're never going to talk about it. And so you grow up confused, hurt, even thinking what you've experienced might even be kind of normal, right? When the fact is, it isn't. And that's why it's so good when we can start getting out from under that and start seeing ourselves differently. So what does shame do? Shame drives us to perfectionism. Perfectionism is a disaster. It's a never-ending report card of failure. And people go, well, if you don't expect perfection, how are you going to get anywhere? Well, the problem is perfection by itself, A, is impossible, and B, it's a goal that you'll never get to. So I'm going to read some quotes here. For perfectionists, life is an endless report card on accomplishments or looks. It's a fast and enduring track to unhappiness. And perfectionism is often accompanied by depression. So if you want to go down the path of perfectionism, sounds like a lot of fun to me, you're going to be very unhappy and you're going to be depressed. Sounds good to me, huh? But that's what we do. What makes perfectionism so toxic is that while those in its grip desire success, what they are most focused on is avoiding failure. You hear the difference there? It's so important to understand that. Trying to achieve success, setting moderately difficult goals, that's healthy. Expecting perfectionism, all you're doing is setting yourself up to fail, and you're living your entire life trying not to. That's a hard way to live. Perfection, of course, is an abstraction, an impossibility in reality, and often it leads to procrastination. There's a difference between striving for excellence and demanding perfection. So make sure we hear the difference there. The problem is, if we've lived and grown up in shame, it's hard for us not to do that because we now have kind of gone to that external validation, and we're looking for people to acknowledge us and to love us for what we've done and all those things, and it just isn't really true. So if you want to keep going down the path of perfectionism, because I do know people that do, in fact, it's kind of fun when we talk about this, and I can see people going, well, I hear perfectionism, I get what you're saying, but, right? Well, here's the but. You keep doing it, you're going to be depressed, you're going to be anxious, you're going to be trying to avoid failure. You can also add in feelings of frustration, despair, shame, guilt, which we already talked about, which can lead us to very addictive behaviors. Sounds like a good path to me, right? Something we need to keep doing. The other thing is it distorts our view of reality in ways that promote addiction and interfere with recovery. One of the things I always try, because I always make an assumption with people in recovery that we are shame-based and we loathe ourselves, and so perfectionism is wildly tempting to do. So I always know that, and so I know that shame interferes with recovery. And so because of that, when someone relapses, I try to immediately tell people when they relapse, it's just part of the deal. If you're doing recovery, you're going to relapse. Just part of it. And sometimes that's hard to hear, and I know some people get uncomfortable, and I've even been told before, well, you're being awfully generous there. Don't you think more people will relapse if they hear it's okay to relapse? But you hear the perfectionism there, by the way. So, yeah, we're going to relapse. Sorry. So distorted perceptions destroy us with perfectionism because it's unreal and it just continues to pile upon itself. Now, here's the other part. This is where I see a lot of us do this in recovery, is we use perfectionism to keep us in check. So if we really have these really super high, unrealistic standards, then maybe we won't act out. Or maybe we won't go cause problems, or maybe we'll behave better. And if I'm not doing this perfectionism, then I am going to relapse, right? Well, the fact is, because of your perfectionism, you're going to relapse. We know the truth. We're not perfect. We never will be perfect. We always will make mistakes. Sorry to all of you out there. But also perfectionism, what it also does, I think, and makes it so destructive, this is the kind of the 1-2 punch of perfectionism that makes it so destructive, is the unrealistic, overwhelming, never-ending failure you create. The other problem is you impose perfectionism on people around you. So it gives you an excuse not to connect. And so I think what I see with people is what Dr. Torsi calls the porcupine index that we talk about all the time, is the porcupine index. We create this wall around us to keep us safe, but the problem is it makes us lonely. And if it's keeping us safe and we're not connecting, we're never going to recover because we're always going to relapse because we're by ourselves. And because then we just feed ourselves more and more intel about how shame-driven we are and how shameful we are and should be, right? So I think that perfectionism is it's a strategy to keep us addicted. I mean, we don't get up in the mornings and say that. We don't say, I'm going to be perfect today so I can relapse or so I can be addicted. But it's what we do because when I'm worried about perfectionism, A, I'm really worried about how you're looking at me, and I'm going to assume you don't see me as perfect, so that means that I have failed. And B, you've hurt me in some way, and you're going to continue to hurt me, and you're always going to continue to fail, and so it's never going to work. So I've created unrealistic outcomes and real unrealistic expectations of both me and other people. So it works pretty well to keep me safe. I don't want to trust anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody closely because if they do, they're going to find out I'm not perfect, but I'm also going to find out they're not perfect. And you know what? In my childhood, I got hurt a lot by adults. So, hey, it's going to happen now. Well, the idea for us is as we get recovered, we become more sophisticated in how we see things, right? We are more healthy. We can set boundaries. This crazy thing we do that we say no to people once in a while. So, but what's the problem? When we become addicted, what's one of the hardest things we have to do? We have to admit we're wrong. I mean, we will oftentimes, when we're in our hurts, habits, and hang-ups, we will work so hard, and we will disagree, and we will say that we can freely admit that we are wrong in the event that we ever were to be wrong, right? You remember me talking about the crazy world of addictive thinking where I know what I'm doing is wrong, and I know the people who I love I'm going to hurt, so I'm going to go ahead and hurt them now, get it over with, and get them out of my life. But yeah, it's the last thing I want. I don't want them to reject me. But because I'm so bad and because I'm doing so many things wrong, they are going to reject me. But I want that, the last thing I want. But the problem is my addiction is so strong, it's really hard for me not to do that. So one of the ways we do this then is we tell everybody else how they don't believe us. I'm so tired. I've told you that I'm not going to drink anymore, and you don't believe me. This really upsets me, right? Or I said I'm not going to do social media anymore. I'm done with it. And then you check in behind me, see if I'm on there. That just really upsets me because you don't trust me. You see how we do that? So what we do is we project, we rationalize, we deny, and we have this thing called omnipotent thinking, right? Where I can quit whenever I want. I'm an adult. I can do whatever I want. I don't need anyone in my life. I can do this without me. In fact, when I've had people in my life, all they've done is hurt me. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, and I can drink. It doesn't hurt me. Or I can be out there and I can have my 33rd bad relationship, and what's it going to matter to you, right? It works so well for us. The problem is that we almost believe ourselves. And then what that does is adds to our loathing of ourselves. So here's what we got to hear. This is so important to hear. In recovery, we have to learn that not only that it is all right to be human, but the greatest achievement out of all is to be a fine human being. Really. That's all it's got to be. So when you go to those meetings that start with an A, right, or you come to NorthStar, any of these places where you come, hopefully that's what you're hearing is let go of the perfection, let go of the self-loathing, and just become a decent person. That's all you got to be. That's not so hard, but when we're addicted, it's very hard, right? So the thing is, what we have to understand is for us to be a fine human being, we also have to realize that first thing we have to do is realize that we are a human being, which means that we will err at many points in our life. And you know what? It's okay. Now, am I saying it's great to fail and think? No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is if you can't let go of this perfectionism, which is code for I hate myself, really, is what it's about, we're never going to be that fine human being because we will never let up on ourselves and we will never have realistic expectations on others, right? And so one of the things we talk about, I always like to say it this way, get your attention. We talk about the double D's, right? And so when we talk about this, we're talking about disappointment and disagreement. So to have a healthy relationship, one of the things we don't understand because we've never had healthy relationships is that if you have a relationship with someone at a deep level, you are going to disappoint them at some point and you're going to disagree with them, just as they're going to do the same to you. And when we're in our loathing, perfectionistic mode, we will never understand that. We will see this as a disaster and calamity, and they obviously couldn't be trusted, or look at me again, I've hurt more people again. When the fact is, you're going to have that. You have to have that in decent relationships. And the other thing is for us to get well is we need to find people we can look up to. In our journey on recovery, we need to find those people who are role models for us that we can see, you know what, I know their life, and they were really messed up. And now they're in recovery and actually been doing it for a while. And what's even worse is I'm starting to see they're having a rich, full, meaningful life. That's kind of annoying. When you loathe yourself and you don't want to be healthy, that's the last thing you want. But hopefully, if you get into support meetings, if you get into groups where the people there have been on the same journey as you, no one in there can rightfully be very arrogant because we've done a lot of things wrong. But here's the other part of it. The only way that we can serve as role models for other people is we have to be willing to admit mistakes. That's why I think it's always so important when someone relapses in NorthStar and they come back the next meeting or week after that, because in a way that's what they're doing. They're helping the rest of us. They're saying, I messed up, I relapsed, I'm not perfect, and you know what? I'm here again, I'm back on the journey, and hopefully others in the room are going, gotcha. So guilt, shame, and perfectionism are such major issues, but here's what we have to hear. Mistakes do not demolish the person. Everybody needs to hear that. Making mistakes is not a sign of anything deep and dark about you. It's about you in recovery, or you just made a mistake. You didn't figure out some stuff. And so what we have to understand is that mistakes are part of our life. And if you think about it, I always think about it, I always like to pick on us as parents. I have 3 kids, is if I ask you as a person, I say, when were some of the most learning moments in your life? You're going to say, when I made a mistake, when things were tough, when things were not going well. That's probably when I learned the most. And then I see us as parents working so hard for our poor little babies not to ever experience anything. It doesn't make any sense. No, I don't want my kids to go out and fail. But you know, the fact is, they got to experience life just like we did. And we sit here and say, yes, some of the best times, and I say best, I mean growing times may not have been best. Some of our most growing times where we had problems, when things were not going well, when we had to turn our faith and will over to God, we actually had to do that. Those are our best days. Well, maybe our kids need that too once in a while. We don't need to be in there blocking and tackling for them all the time. So if we can figure that part out, we made a mistake, I need to move on. That's guilt. I made a mistake. It means I'm an awful person. I'm a failure as a person. I'm terrible as a person. Then that's shame. We don't want that. Guilt's good. We need to feel guilty when we don't do things right. Shame is not. Shame only takes us back to where we started with all of our stuff. And again, I could ask every one of you, think about that time in your life when you had a failure. How did it make you better? I mean, I wish they weren't so. Like I said, like Russell Brand says, addiction starts with pain, addiction ends with pain. It's just, I wish there was a different one. I really wish there was a different formula, but that's what it really is. I can promise you that no one comes to NorthStar if they're feeling great about life. They may stay and keep coming, which is cool, but I'm sorry, nobody enters those doors the first day going, you know what, my life is so good and I can't even think of a problem right now. I just felt like coming to NorthStar tonight. That is not what happens. I come to NorthStar because I am losing everything. I'm unable. Something has become more powerful than me. My life has become unmanageable. I'm scared. I hate myself. I'm sure all of you are going to hate me in here too and judge me, but I didn't have where else to go. That's who comes to NorthStar in so many ways. So for us, don't let mistakes demolish you. It's part of life. You're never going to be perfect. No one ever's going to be. It's always, I love Mary Pickford's quote here. It's kind of sad, actually, her story. A very famous actress from the 1910, 1920 era. She was the silent movie actress, and then, of course, sound came, and she kind of lost her career. And she actually died from addiction, which is sad. She died from alcohol. But she has a great quote, and so I'm going to assume she knew what she was talking about. You may have a fresh start at any moment you choose, for this thing that we call failure is not falling down, but the staying down. So I hope we can hear that in our own lives. You make a mistake, it didn't demolish you. I think that's one of the things in NorthStar I see that's so, what really helps us move forward and grow, is we all have made mistakes. And we got back into NorthStar, and all we've done is we've been loved and supported. That's pretty cool. So it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. Not saying we want to, but it's okay. Think about this just for a minute. What would happen in your life if we made it okay to make mistakes and fail? Think how different that would be. I see people wincing right now when I say that. What would happen if we let go of guilt and shame from our past? How different would we look? What would happen if we stopped telling ourselves that if we fail at something that we are a failure? Think if we got away from that and saw it the other way. So step 10 of the 12 steps is we continue to take personal inventory. When we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. I think promptly is the word there that's so important. So guys out there online, here, if you make a mistake, don't be so quick to hide it. Don't be so quick to be embarrassed by it, but to bring it up. And what it will do is it will take so much power away from your shame and your guilt. I'll close with this quote. We are not immune from making a mistake, and when I admit humanity, people invariably understand. If you think about it, that's true, right? I mean, certainly there are times, but how many times have you admitted to your mistake, and everybody's really forgiving, right? It is only when I insist that I was right that I provoke others' anger. And so what we need to do is surrender our delusion of perfectionism to being decent human beings. So we always end our prayer, meeting with the prayer of serenity, and I'd like to do that today. Actually, I'm going to do one more thing. Let me read Romans 8. Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, because through Christ Jesus, the law of the Spirit who gives life has set you free. Everybody hear that? From the law of sin and death. We can quit being perfect. God loves us. All right, let's close with prayer of serenity. And again, if any of you ever would like to contact me, please do so. You can call me 804-746-5081. Let's pray. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will. that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. You know, I think if we would just really listen to the prayer of serenity, our lives would be so much better. And in this prayer so much talks about not being perfect. So anyway, go out there and have a non-perfect week this week, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you for joining.